Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, well, we're charting some really extreme territory. It's a strange mix. On one hand, we've got these incredibly precise notes about diet, like down to the structure of cooking oils,
Mhm.
and then boom, it swings right into this huge narrative. Cosmic war, ancient hybrids, secret history linking hidden groups to, well, modern finance. It's a lot.
It really is. And our job today is basically to try and navigate the synthesis for you. The sources we're looking at describe what they term an ongoing species-level battle. It's about humanity's future, apparently.
Eh.
And they focus very heavily on these alleged hybrid antagonists, but also, surprisingly, on how your diet, like the specific omega ratios in your cells,
Hmm.
supposedly plays a key role in resisting psychological manipulation, mind control, essentially.
So we're connecting tiny health details to these massive, frankly, outlandish geopolitical and even cosmic claims.
Exactly. We're drawing from personal health notes, but also this detailed analysis of an article
Yeah.
that seems to come from somewhere like Veterans Today. It's quite the combination.
All right, let's try and unpack it. Maybe start where the sources did. There was a specific biological correction mentioned right at the start.
Yeah, that's right. Before getting into the really deep stuff, the notes make a point of clarifying something we apparently discussed before. The reference should have been to melanin, not melatonin, when talking about true fats.
Melanin, not melatonin. Okay. Why is that distinction so important to the source? Seems like a minor detail.
Well, it seems minor, but it's actually kind of central to their whole theory of cellular defense. Melatonin, that's the sleep hormone.
Right.
But melanin is a pigment. And the source material links melanin to the body's basic ability to properly use what they call true fats. This, they argue, gives your cells a specific kind of resilience.
Resilience against what, though?
Against,
Yeah.
well, manipulation. The idea is if your cells are working optimally, supported by the right fats and proper melanin expression, it creates a sort of foundational buffer, psychologically. You can't fight a mental war, the logic goes, if your brain chemistry is fundamentally off because your cells aren't processing things correctly.
Okay. That definitely raises the stakes on the whole diet thing. Most people think about smoke points for cooking oil.
Right.
And the source does mention that some oils like coconut or avocado are structurally more like fats, stable up to around 300 Celsius. But that stability isn't the main danger they're warning about, is it?
No, not the main one. The real focus is on what they call the threshold effect, especially with oils high in omega-6, like, canola, soy,
Yeah.
vegetable oils.
The threshold effect, right?
People think, oh, I'll just cook at a low heat, it's fine. But the
Mhm.
source argues it's not about waiting until 100% of the oil turns into trans fats. The idea is even a small amount of damaged oil, once it reaches a certain percentage inside your body, can trigger your system to flip into a, quote, different kind of processing.
A different kind of processing. What does that actually mean, according to them? What happens when you cross this threshold?
The theory suggests it's about cell membrane structure. Crossing that threshold messes with your body's inflammation pathways, apparently, and more importantly, it screws with neurological signaling.
Ah, okay.
Your brain chemistry gets sluggish or maybe overly reactive. Basically, it makes you mentally vulnerable.
So for anyone listening, the practical advice here is what? Be super strict.
Pretty much. The source advises going 100% cold turkey on these omega-6 oils initially, because even tiny exposures can apparently flip you back into that bad processing mode.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time, they say maybe a year or two, to build up the right omega-3 ratio before you could even think about handling minimal exposure again.
Wow, okay. So this really intense physical discipline that's framed as the groundwork for dealing with the main topic. This species-level psychological war, supposedly being waged by entities the source calls the Khazarian Mafia, or KM.
Exactly. That's the bridge. From cell health to, well, cosmic conflict. The sources analyze an article that originally mentioned the Khazarian Mafia.
Khazarian?
Yeah, but other materials clarify it's a reference to the Khazarian Mafia.
Yeah.
And connecting the dots, the sources lay out this scenario where humanity is under attack from space aliens using these very sophisticated psychological weapons.
And it's not a minor threat, according to this. They claim something like 70% of people are susceptible.
That's the claim, 70%. And the really insidious part, like in that movie They Live, that the source actually references.
Right, the glasses.
Yeah, the attacks are surreptitious. The people affected, they don't know what's happening. They just sort of absorb the controller's agenda. And if you try to tell them, they'll argue with you, dispute it completely. They essentially become like unwitting agents.
That's quite
Right.
a picture. If this alleged operation is that widespread, what's the defense strategy mentioned? You said something about the secret space program, the SSP.
Yeah, there's this persistent rumor, according to the sources, that the SSP, or maybe Space Force now, is working towards weapons parity with these uh, m malevolent, consuming aliens.
Weapons parity, so like leveling the playing field technologically.
Kind of. The idea is they're trying to weaponize humanity, basically advance our own tech and ability so we're not totally outgunned by these alien groups.
Okay, and if they achieve parity, what then? The conspiracy line suggests the aliens would then reveal themselves, leading to open war.
That's the speculation. Once parity is reached, the gloves come off, and it becomes a major war mode.
But why the slow psychological game now if they have that kind of power? Why not just show up?
Good question. The sources seem to suggest this slow approach is needed because the aliens want to soften us up first, compromise our defenses from within. And to do that, they use intermediaries. Which brings us to their alleged agents on Earth, the remnants of Homo Capensis, the Coneheads.
Homo capensis. Okay, let's define that. What are they supposed to be? Where do they come from in this narrative?
Well, the speculation is that they're a hybrid species. The source material basically calls them GMO creatures.
GMO?
Yeah, created by space aliens. The Anunnaki are often mentioned mixing their own DNA with early human DNA. So they have alien lineage, but they're technically native because they apparently only exist here on Earth. They were supposedly designed as a sort of middle management ruling class, put in charge of humanity.
And a conehead shape. That's key.
Absolutely key, according to this. The conical skull supposedly gives them significantly more brain power for thinking, planning, and crucially, a psychic edge. They're meant to be masters of mental control, psychological warfare.
Right, and this is where it connects to modern times, right? The source claims the Khazarian Mafia aren't human, and specifically points to the Rockefellers.
That's the explicit link they make. The K&M ain't human and the Rockefeller line are supposedly direct descendants of these Homo Capensis coneheads.
Wow.
Yeah, the sources even suggest looking at old photos of the Rockefellers. They argue you can see these conical features more pronounced in earlier generations, presented as sort of physical evidence.
Okay, so this conflict, this battle against their control, how long has it supposedly been going on?
The sources talk about a struggle going back maybe 6,000 years, with the current phase lasting at least 800 years. It's a vast time scale.
Yeah.
But the narrative also includes a critical flaw in the Conehead's design.
A flaw? What kind of flaw?
A genetic one. Apparently, the aliens created them in a self-eliminating way. The hybridization itself doesn't breed true. Their unique genetics decay over generations if they only breed amongst themselves. It's like a built-in obsolescence.
And did this flaw become critical at some point? Is there a date?
Well, the source admits this is based on scant evidence and speculation. But they pinpoint the early 1500s. They even throw out a specific date like 1501 or 1502 as maybe the birth year of the last viable, purebred Homo capensis female.
The last female. Okay, so if they couldn't produce their own breeding females anymore, they had to.
Exactly. They had to interbreed with humans, the very population they were supposedly controlling.
Which would dilute their traits over time.
Precisely. That allegedly started this steady decay, reduced their numbers, and gradually lessened those distinct physical characteristics, the brow ridge, the conical head shape. The source claims you can track this down the Rockefeller line, generation by generation, the conical part getting smaller.
So they're being bred out of existence, potentially losing their psychic powers within maybe a few more generations?
That's the idea. And according to the source, this explains the urgency we supposedly see now. The KM are accelerating their plans.
Plans which include some pretty dark stuff. Adrenochrome.
Yeah, the source mentions them being alleged adrenochrome drinkers, consuming human blood, viewing us as primitives, basically. And they're supposedly rushing because they think their alien masters are coming back and their own genetic window is closing fast.
Okay, let's pivot back to the psychological war itself. If the enemy uses mental control, fear, how do you defend against that, according to this material?
It all comes down to self-control, rigorous self-control. That includes carefully managing the language, the images, everything you consume mentally. The source uses this striking phrase, Munchausen's by proxy, put on you by language and image.
Munchausen's by proxy, meaning they make you sick through information.
Kinda, yeah. If they're masters at controlling minds through inputs, then controlling your own inputs is apparently the primary defense.
Which brings us to maybe the most controversial claim, linking ancient dietary laws to mind control.
Yeah, this is
What do you
pretty
think?
radical. The source contends that ancient dietary rules, prohibitions supposedly imposed by gods, like they mention an entity called El imposing rules on the Essenes. Yeah, just El. Anyway, the claim is these rules weren't about health or piety. They were actually calculated methods of mind control, designed to create mental limits, make people easier to manage. It's part of why the source rejects this standard Exodus story, suggesting it had to happen along the Arabian Peninsula to fit this framework of control.
That's a huge leap. How do they connect eating certain foods or not eating them to failing mental defenses or even impacting things like remote viewing? What's the proposed mechanism?
Well, the core argument is that a compromised diet creates the underlying vulnerability. For instance, they really hammer non-carnivore diets. Vegetarianism, they argue, was potentially designed to be deleterious, harmful, malicious.
Stories.
Yeah. They claim humans are designed by the universe to eat meat, pointing to teeth, digestion. So if your physical body is weakened by the wrong diet, your mental defenses just crumble.
There was also an environmental argument mixed in there about grain farming being worse than beef.
Yes, surprisingly. It's part of their overall case against non-meat diets. The source claims growing grains kills far more life insects, birds, rodents per pound of food than raising beef on the same land. Plus, they criticize grains for low nutrient bioavailability, under 20% sometimes. A cow, they argue, actually supports more life biospherically.
Okay. And to tie this back directly to the mind control idea, they used a specific example, someone named Dick Algie.
Right. Dick Algie is presented as someone known in certain circles for promoting defeatism, resistance is futile sort of thing.
Okay.
And the source directly links his perceived lack of physical health, claiming he's a vegetarian who eats seed oils, to his mental state and his work. The claim is his poor health literally taints his remote viewing results, leading to these negative defeatist outcomes.
So they're saying his negativity isn't genuine insight, but either a result of his bad diet or maybe even the enemy's influence exploiting that weakness.
Exactly. It's presented as a prime example of their core concept. You need physical and mental purity to stand a chance against this massive species-level threat.
Right. So wrapping all this up, the main message from these sources seems to be this urgent call for, well, radical self-improvement, but also exposure. Getting all this out in the open so normies, as they say, can grasp where this conflict supposedly comes from.
Yeah, from the omega-3s in your kitchen right up to, ancient cone-headed genetic engineers.
It's presented as this constant battle needing vigilance, self-control, because things like apathy and defeatism are framed as the enemy's main weapons, implanted psychologically.
Exactly.
Which leads us to a final, pretty challenging thought for you, the listener, drawn directly from this material. The analysts whose work we've been discussing, they actually end by saying that they themselves, like 99% of humanity, aren't really self-examining, and that this lack of awareness inevitably colors their own analysis. So if self-control and clarity are supposedly the only keys to fighting this psychological war, how can anyone, including the analysts, verify the integrity of their own insights? Especially when the source itself suggests most analysis is fundamentally flawed by this lack of deep self-reflection.
Right.
What concrete steps could you even take to ensure that the feelings of defeatism or hopelessness that you might encounter or maybe even feel yourself are genuinely yours and not the result of some external mental operation designed specifically to paralyze you? How do you know?